The phone rang at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning in November. I remember the exact time because I was standing in my kitchen in Portland, Oregon, watching the autumn rain streak down the window, holding my coffee cup that read, "World's Best Mom," a gift from my son Trevor when he was 12 years old. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was the same maternal instinct that had woken me at 3 in the morning when Trevor was 17 and wrapped his car around a telephone pole 3 states away. "Mrs. Thatcher?" a woman's voice asked, cold and professional. "Yes, this is Temperance Thatcher," I replied. "This is Vivian, your daughter-in-law." The way she emphasized daughter-in-law made it sound like an accusation. Vivian and I had never been close. In the 8 years since she married my son, she had systematically cut me out of their lives, moving them from Portland to Boston, screening my calls, making excuses about why I couldn't visit. "I'm calling to inform you that Trevor passed away 3 days ago. Heart attack. It was very sudden." The coffee cup slipped from my hand. I heard it shatter on the kitchen floor, felt the hot liquid splash against my legs, but the pain seemed distant, disconnected. Trevor. My Trevor. Dead. What? When? I managed to choke out. "Where is he? When is the funeral? I need to—" "The funeral already happened," Vivian interrupted, her voice flat. "Yesterday. We held a small, private service. Just immediate family. I am immediate family. I'm his mother." "It was what Trevor would have wanted," she said with false sympathy. "He wanted to keep things intimate. I'm sorry you're upset, but the decision has been made. You had no right. You had no right to keep me from saying goodbye to my son. I had every right. I'm his wife. I made the arrangements he would have wanted. I really must go now. There's so much to handle. Goodbye, Temperance." She hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, 71 years old, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee, and felt something inside me break just as completely. Trevor was 43 years old, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after his father walked out when he was 5, the teenager who'd held my hand through chemotherapy when I had breast cancer 15 years ago, the man who'd promised, even as Vivian pulled him across the country, that nothing would ever come between us, and now he was gone, buried, in the ground, without me there to hold his hand one last time. I don't remember cleaning up the coffee. I don't remember calling my neighbor, Millicent, who found me sitting on the floor an hour later, staring at nothing. I don't remember much of that entire day except the crushing weight of a grief so profound it felt like drowning. Millicent stayed with me. She made calls to find out more information. Through her persistence, we discovered that Trevor had indeed died of a massive heart attack while at work in Boston. He was pronounced dead at Massachusetts General Hospital. The funeral had been held at a private chapel, followed by burial at Mount Auburn Cemetery. Vivian had posted about it on social media. I discovered this when Millicent showed me her phone. There were photos of the funeral, of Vivian in an elegant black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Said goodbye to my beloved husband today in an intimate ceremony with our closest friends and family. Trevor was a light in this world. He would have wanted this kept private and meaningful, but I wasn't there. His mother, the woman who gave birth to him, who raised him, who loved him more than life itself. I wasn't even mentioned. In one photo, I saw Vivian's parents, her brother, even her college roommate, but no mention of me. It was as if I didn't exist, as if 30 years of being Trevor's mother had been erased with a single decision. That night, lying in bed unable to sleep, I made a decision. I would go to Boston. I would visit my son's grave, even if I'd been denied the chance to see him one last time. I would stand over the earth that covered him and tell him all the things I should have said when he was alive. I booked a flight for the next morning. Millicent offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. She drove me to the airport, hugged me tightly, and made me promise to call her every day. The flight to Boston felt endless. I sat by the window, watching clouds pass beneath us, remembering Trevor as a baby, his first smile. Trevor at 6, losing his first tooth. Trevor at 16, getting his driver's license. Trevor at 22, graduating from college with honors in computer engineering. Trevor at 35, calling to tell me he'd met someone named Vivian. I should have seen the red flags then. The way she'd monopolized our phone conversation, speaking for Trevor. The way she'd insisted on a small wedding with just close family, which somehow didn't include my sister or Trevor's cousins. The way she'd smiled at me with her mouth but never her eyes. But I'd wanted Trevor to be happy. I'd wanted him to have the family I'd failed to give him when his father left. So I'd ignored my instincts, swallowed my concerns, and tried to welcome Vivian into our lives. That had been my first mistake. The plane landed at Logan Airport in the late afternoon. I rented a car, something I rarely did anymore at my age, but I needed the independence, and drove to a small hotel near Cambridge. The front desk clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, noticed my red and swollen face. "Are you okay, ma'am?" she asked gently. "I'm here for a funeral." I lied. Or maybe it wasn't a lie. Maybe I was there for my own private funeral. A chance to mourn what I'd been denied. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, and those simple words, from a stranger, broke something open inside me. I stood at that hotel counter and cried while this young woman came around and hugged me, not caring that she was on duty or that other guests were staring. "Thank you," I whispered, when I finally pulled myself together. "My mother died last year," she said softly. "I know how it feels. Take all the time you need." In my hotel room, I looked up the cemetery address and visiting hours. Mount Auburn Cemetery. I would go tomorrow morning. I would finally get to say goodbye. But first, I did something that surprised even myself. I looked up Vivian's address. Trevor had mentioned once, years ago, that they'd bought a house in Brookline. With some online searching, I found it. A beautiful Victorian on a tree-lined street, worth well over $1 million. I didn't plan to go there. I just needed to know where my son had lived in his final years. I needed to picture him somewhere, doing something, being alive. That night, I barely slept. When I did drift off, I dreamed of Trevor as a little boy, calling for me. "Mommy, where are you? Mommy, I need you." But no matter how fast I ran in the dream, I could never reach him. I woke at dawn, exhausted but resolute. Today, I would visit my son's grave. Today, I would say the goodbye that Vivian had stolen from me. I dressed carefully in a black dress I'd brought, pinned the cameo brooch Trevor had given me for my 60th birthday, and drove through the quiet Boston morning to Mount Auburn Cemetery. The cemetery was beautiful in a way that made grief even more poignant. Established in 1831, it was more like a park than a graveyard, with winding paths, mature trees showing their autumn colors, and Gothic Revival architecture. In any other circumstances, I might have appreciated the beauty. At the office, I asked for Trevor's plot location. The woman behind the desk looked it up, gave me a map with the location circled, and offered her condolences. I found the grave easily. It was in a newer section, the earth still freshly turned. There was a temporary marker with his name, Trevor Maxwell Thatcher. Born June 15th, 1981. Died November 7th, 2024. Beloved husband. Beloved husband. Not beloved son. Not beloved anything else. Just husband. I stood there for a long time, the cold November wind cutting through my coat, and I talked to my son. I told him about the little boy he'd been, about how proud I'd been of every accomplishment, about how much I missed him already. I told him I was sorry I hadn't been there at the end. I told him I loved him more than words could ever express. And then I told him something else. I told him that I was going to find out why Vivian had kept me away. I told him that I was going to understand what had happened to the relationship between us in those final years. I told him that I wouldn't let his memory be erased, wouldn't let our bond be rewritten by someone who'd known him for only 8 years when I'd known him his entire life. "I'm your mother," I whispered to the cold earth. And nothing, not even death, can change that. I placed flowers on the grave, yellow roses, his favorite, and left the cemetery with a new sense of purpose. Grief still crushed my chest with every breath, but beneath it was something harder, something that felt almost like anger. I drove back to my hotel, changed into more practical clothes, and made a decision. I was going to Vivian's house. I was going to demand answers. I was going to understand why she'd done this. The Victorian in Brookline was even more impressive in person. 3 stories, immaculate landscaping, luxury cars in the driveway. Trevor had clearly done well for himself financially. I'd known he was successful. He'd worked for a major tech company, but I hadn't realized just how wealthy they'd become. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. For a moment, I thought no one was home. Then the door opened, and there she was. Vivian looked exactly as I remembered from the few times we'd met. Tall, slender, perfectly put together even in casual clothes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her face barely lined despite being in her late 30s. She looked at me with confusion that quickly shifted to irritation. "Temperance," she said flatly. "What are you doing here?" "I came to visit my son's grave," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "The grave I should have been able to visit 3 days ago at his funeral. We've been over this. Trevor wanted— Don't tell me what my son wanted." The words exploded out of me. "Don't you dare stand there and tell me that Trevor would have wanted his mother excluded from his funeral." Vivian's eyes went cold. "You need to leave. Now. Not until you tell me why. Why did you do this to me? What did I ever do to you?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt, not remorse, something harder. Satisfaction, maybe. "Trevor and I had an agreement," she said finally. "If anything happened to either of us, we'd keep things private. He didn't want a circus. He didn't want drama. He wanted peace. I'm his mother. Not a circus, not drama. His mother. A mother who Trevor barely spoke to anymore," Vivian said cruelly. "A mother who he'd grown distant from. Maybe you should ask yourself why that happened instead of blaming me." The accusation hit me like a physical blow, because it wasn't entirely untrue. Trevor and I had grown distant in recent years. Our phone calls had become less frequent, more superficial. His visits home had stopped altogether, but I'd assumed it was just life, just the natural evolution of a son building his own family. Now, standing on Vivian's doorstep, I wondered if there was more to it, if she'd actively worked to create that distance, if I'd been pushed out deliberately. "I need to see his things," I said suddenly. "His personal effects, photos from when he was young. I have a right to—" "You have no rights here," Vivian interrupted. "Everything Trevor owned is mine now. His wife, his legal heir. You're not entitled to anything." She started to close the door, but I put my hand against it. "Please," I said, my voice breaking. "Please, I just want something of his. Anything. A photo, a shirt, something to remember him by." For a moment, Vivian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then it hardened again. "I'll send you some photos," she said. "Digital copies. That's all I can offer. Now please leave before I call the police." The door closed in my face. I stood there, 71 years old, on the doorstep of my dead son's house, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I drove back to the hotel in a daze. Checked my phone. No messages except one from Millicent asking how I was doing. I couldn't bring myself to respond. What would I say? That I'd been right. That Vivian was exactly as cold and cruel as I'd feared. That I'd failed to protect my relationship with my son, and now he was gone forever. That night, in my hotel room, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going back to Portland yet. I was staying in Boston. I was going to find out what really happened to Trevor. I was going to understand why our relationship had deteriorated. And I was going to make sure that Vivian didn't get away with erasing me from my son's life story. I didn't know it then, but that decision would lead me down a path that would reveal truths I never expected, force me to confront painful realities, and ultimately teach me that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is demand the truth, even when that truth breaks your heart. Chapter 2. Digging for Truth. I extended my hotel stay indefinitely. When Millicent called that evening, I told her everything: Vivian's coldness, the grave with only her beloved husband. The door closed in my face. "Stay there as long as you need," Millicent said firmly. "I'll watch your house, collect your mail. You do what you have to do, Tempe." Millicent had been calling me Tempe since we became neighbors 15 years ago. She was one of the few people who'd stood by me through everything: the divorce, the cancer, the lonely years when Trevor was building his life across the country. "Thank you," I whispered, tears threatening again. I don't know what I'm even doing here. Maybe Vivian is right. Maybe Trevor and I had grown apart, and I just didn't want to see it. "Nonsense," Millicent replied sharply. You and Trevor talked every week until about 2 years ago. Then suddenly the calls stopped, the visits ended, and you got nothing but generic holiday cards. That's not natural drift. Tempe, that's interference." Her words gave me courage. The next morning, I started my investigation in earnest. I began with Trevor's workplace. His company, Nexus Technologies, had offices in Cambridge. I drove there, walked into the gleaming glass building, and asked to speak with someone in human resources. The receptionist, a young man with thick-rimmed glasses, looked uncertain. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "My son worked here. Trevor Thatcher. He passed away last week. I'm trying to understand what happened." His expression shifted to sympathy immediately. "Oh, Mrs. Thatcher." We were all so shocked. "Mr. Thatcher was well liked here. Let me see if someone can speak with you." After a 15-minute wait, I was ushered into an office where a woman in her 50s introduced herself as Patricia Aldridge, Director of Human Resources. "Mrs. Thatcher, I'm so very sorry for your loss," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Trevor was an exceptional employee. His death was a tremendous shock to all of us. Can you tell me what happened?" I asked. "I mean, the details. I wasn't informed until after the funeral had already taken place." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "I see. Well, Trevor was working late on a Thursday evening. He'd been putting in long hours on a major project. Around 7 p.m., he collapsed at his desk. His colleague, Marcus, called 911 immediately. They got him to Mass General within 20 minutes. But I'm so sorry. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The doctors said it was a massive coronary event. Very sudden, very catastrophic. He likely didn't suffer." "Had he mentioned any health problems? Heart issues?" "Not that we were aware of. In fact, he'd passed his company physical just 6 months ago with flying colors. It was completely unexpected." "Can I speak with Marcus, the colleague who was with him?" Patricia hesitated. "I can reach out to him and ask if he's willing, but I can't force it. He was quite traumatized by what happened." "I understand. Please, I'd appreciate anything you can arrange." She took my hotel number and promised to pass it along to Marcus. As I stood to leave, I asked one more question. "Did Vivian come here after it happened?" Patricia's expression became carefully neutral. "Yes, she came to collect his personal effects. She was quite efficient about it." The word choice was interesting. Efficient, not grief-stricken, not devastated. Efficient. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Marcus Chen, Trevor's colleague. "Mrs. Thatcher?" My voice probably shook with eagerness. "Thank you so much for calling." "I'm so sorry about Trevor," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "He talked about you sometimes. He missed you." Those 4 words, "he missed you," nearly broke me. "Did he?" I managed to ask. We'd grown so distant in recent years. There was a pause. "Mrs. Thatcher, can we meet in person? There are things I think you should know, but I'd rather not discuss them over the phone." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near his office. An hour later, I was sitting across from Marcus, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes that held obvious grief. Trevor and I worked together for 5 years. Marcus began, stirring his coffee absently. We became friends. Real friends. He was one of the good ones, you know. Never cutthroat, always willing to help. I nodded, recognizing the son I'd raised. About 2 years ago, Trevor started changing. Marcus continued. He became more withdrawn, stopped joining us for after-work drinks, seemed stressed all the time. I asked him once if everything was okay, and he said Vivian was going through a difficult time and needed his support. What kind of difficult time? He never specified, but he started working longer hours, staying at the office later and later. I figured he was avoiding going home, honestly. Then about 6 months ago, he confided something to me. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. He said he'd found out Vivian was having an affair. He'd discovered emails on her computer. He was devastated but also scared. He said Vivian had threatened that if he left her, she'd make sure he lost everything. His house, his savings, everything. She'd somehow maneuvered their finances so that leaving would destroy him financially. I felt sick. My son had been trapped, miserable, and I hadn't known. "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said Vivian had convinced him you were judgmental, that you'd never approved of her and would say, "I told you so." He was ashamed, Mrs. Thatcher. Ashamed that his marriage was a failure. Ashamed that he'd let himself get into this situation. Tears streamed down my face. I would never have judged him. I just wanted him to be happy. I know. I told him that. I encouraged him to reach out to you, especially in those last few months. He said he was going to... Actually, he said he was planning to call you, to explain everything, to maybe visit for Thanksgiving. He missed you terribly, Mrs. Thatcher. He really did. But he died before he could make that call, before he could rebuild the bridge that Vivian had systematically burned. There's more, Marcus said carefully. The night he died, he and Vivian had a massive fight. He came to work that evening upset, agitated. He told me Vivian had served him with divorce papers, but on her terms that would leave him virtually penniless. She'd been planning it, stockpiling evidence of alleged mismanagement of their joint finances. She'd positioned everything to make herself look like the victim. Could stress have triggered the heart attack? Marcus met my eyes. The doctors said it was a coronary event. But yes, extreme stress can be a trigger, especially if there's an underlying condition no one knew about. Trevor was 43. Mrs. Thatcher. He should have had decades left. I sat back, processing everything. So Vivian had destroyed my son's happiness, isolated him from his family, trapped him in a miserable marriage, and then pushed him to the breaking point just before his death. And then she denied me the chance to say goodbye. There's one more thing you should know, Marcus said quietly. After Trevor died, Vivian came to collect his things from his desk. She took his laptop, his personal files, everything. But I'd noticed something earlier that week. Trevor had been making copies of documents, storing them on a USB drive he kept in his desk. I think he was building a case against Vivian, gathering evidence for the divorce. Do you still have access to his desk? Marcus shook his head. Vivian cleaned it out completely, but he hesitated. Trevor gave me something about a week before he died, a manila envelope. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you. He had your address in Portland. I was planning to mail it, but since you're here... He reached into his bag and pulled out a manila envelope, slightly worn at the edges. My hands shook as I took it. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for being his friend. Thank you for this. I liked Trevor. He deserved better than what he got. I hope whatever's in there helps you. Back in my hotel room, I sat on the bed for a long time, staring at the envelope. Whatever was inside would be Trevor's last communication to me, his final words. I was terrified to open it, terrified of what I might find. Finally, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the contents. There were several documents, bank statements, emails, legal papers, and a letter addressed to me in Trevor's handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear Mom, it started, and my eyes immediately filled with tears. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Marcus promised he'd get this to you, and I trust him completely. Mom, I'm so sorry. Sorry for the distance between us. Sorry for not calling more. Sorry for not visiting. Sorry for letting Vivian control our relationship. You were right about her from the beginning. I should have listened to you. I've made so many mistakes. The biggest was letting her convince me that you were judgmental, that you didn't approve of my choices, that it was better to keep my distance. She systematically cut me off from you, and I let her do it. I'm ashamed of that. The truth is, I've been miserable for the past 2 years. Vivian has been having an affair with someone from her gym. When I confronted her, she threatened to destroy me financially if I tried to leave. She's been moving our assets around, creating a paper trail that makes me look like I've been hiding money and mismanaging our finances. She's been planning this for months, maybe years. I've been gathering evidence. It's all in this envelope. Bank statements showing her transfers, emails proving the affair, documents showing how she systematically positioned herself to take everything. I was planning to file for divorce on my own terms, with evidence to protect myself. But more than that, Mom, I was planning to come home, to Portland, to rebuild my life, and to rebuild our relationship. I miss you so much. I miss our Sunday phone calls. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss feeling like I have a mother who loves me unconditionally. If something has happened to me, if Vivian is the one handling my affairs, please don't let her rewrite our story. You were the best mother anyone could ask for. You sacrificed everything to raise me alone. You were there for every milestone, every disappointment, every triumph. I love you, Mom. I always have. I always will. Please use this evidence to protect yourself and my memory. Don't let Vivian win. I love you more than words can say. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that more often. Your son, Trevor. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, my heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Trevor had loved me. He'd missed me. He'd been planning to come home. And Vivian had known. That's why she'd served him with divorce papers. That's why she'd pushed him to the breaking point. She'd been trying to strike first, to take everything before Trevor could expose her. Then he died, and she got everything anyway. I looked at the documents Trevor had gathered. Bank statements showing large transfers to an account in Vivian's name alone. Emails between Vivian and her lover, discussing their future together once she got rid of the dead weight. Legal documents showing how she'd restructured their assets to exclude Trevor. It was all here. Evidence of systematic financial manipulation, infidelity, and abuse. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I wasn't going to let Vivian win. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my son's story, erase my role in his life, or get away with what she'd done. My son had asked me to protect his memory, and that's exactly what I was going to do. Chapter 3. Building my case. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since before Trevor's death. I had evidence. I had purpose. I had a mission, but I also knew I needed help. At 71, I understood my limitations. I needed someone who knew the law, who could tell me what I could legally do with the information Trevor had left me. I called Millicent first. I need a lawyer, I told her. Someone good. Someone who handles estate law and possibly fraud. I know just the person, Millicent replied without hesitation. My nephew, Julian. He's an attorney in Seattle, but he has contacts everywhere. Let me call him. Within 2 hours, I had a phone appointment scheduled with Geraldine Wyatt, a Boston estate attorney who came highly recommended. I explained my situation carefully, sent her copies of Trevor's documents, and waited. She called me back the next day. Mrs. Thatcher, I've reviewed everything. This is quite remarkable and disturbing. Your son documented systematic financial abuse and manipulation. The question is, what do you want to achieve? I want justice for Trevor, I said firmly. I want people to know what Vivian did. I want her held accountable. Geraldine was quiet for a moment. Legally, you have limited options. As Trevor's wife, Vivian is his legal heir. Unless Trevor had a will specifically leaving assets to you, which seems unlikely given the circumstances, she inherits everything automatically. My heart sank. So there's nothing I can do. I didn't say that, Geraldine replied. There are several avenues we can explore. First, if we can prove that Vivian's actions directly contributed to Trevor's death, the stress, the emotional abuse, we might have grounds for a wrongful death claim. It's difficult to prove, but not impossible. What else? If Vivian committed fraud in manipulating the marital assets, she could face criminal charges. That wouldn't get you inheritance rights, but it would hold her accountable. Additionally, if Trevor had any individual assets that predate the marriage or were specifically designated to you, life insurance, retirement accounts with beneficiary designations, those might bypass the standard inheritance rules. Can you find out? I'll need you to sign some authorization forms. Then I can start digging into Trevor's financial records. In the meantime, I suggest you continue documenting everything. Every interaction with Vivian, every piece of information you discover. Build a timeline. I hung up feeling slightly more hopeful. I had an attorney. I had a plan. I had purpose. That afternoon, I drove to Mount Auburn Cemetery again. I needed to talk to Trevor, to tell him what I was doing, to promise him I wouldn't let his story be erased. The grave looked different in the afternoon light. Someone had been there recently. Fresh flowers sat beside the ones I'd left. White lilies. I bent down to read the card attached. Gone too soon. Will always have Paris. V. Paris. Vivian and Trevor had taken a trip to Paris for their 5th anniversary. I remembered Trevor calling me from a cafe, sounding happier than he'd been in months. I thought maybe things were improving in his marriage. Now I wondered if that trip had been the beginning of Vivian's affair, if her lover had been there too. if Trevor had been completely oblivious to what was happening right in front of him. "I'm going to fix this," I told Trevor's grave. "I'm going to make sure people know the truth. I'm going to make her pay for what she did to you. To us." Over the next few days, I did exactly what Geraldine suggested. I built a timeline. I documented every phone call Trevor and I had for the past 8 years, noting when they became less frequent, when the tone changed, when they stopped altogether. I compiled the documents Trevor had left, organizing them chronologically. I reached out to Marcus again, asking if he'd be willing to provide a formal statement about Trevor's state of mind in the months before his death. He agreed immediately. Trevor was my friend. If his death wasn't just bad luck, if she pushed him to it, she needs to be held accountable. I also did something I probably shouldn't have. I started watching Vivian's house. I knew it was borderline stalking. I knew if she caught me, she could get a restraining order. But I needed to understand her life, her patterns, her secrets. What I discovered shocked me. 3 days after I started my surveillance, a man arrived at the house. Tall, handsome, probably in his early 40s. He had a key. He walked in like he owned the place. He stayed for 2 hours, and when he left, Vivian stood in the doorway kissing him goodbye. Not a quick peck, but a long, passionate kiss. Trevor had been dead for less than 2 weeks, and she already had her lover moving freely in and out of their home, my son's home. I took photos, documented dates and times, added it all to my growing file. That weekend, I received a call from Geraldine. "Mrs. Thatcher, I have some interesting information. Trevor did have a life insurance policy through his employer, a substantial one, worth $500,000, and the beneficiary listed is you." My breath caught. What? He never changed it from when he first started the job, before he was married. Vivian might not even know about it. The payout should come directly to you as the named beneficiary. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. Trevor had never removed me as his beneficiary, even after 8 years of marriage, even after Vivian had isolated him from me. He'd left me as the person to receive his life insurance. That meant something. "There's more," Geraldine continued. "I did some digging into the couple's financial records. Vivian has been systematically draining their joint accounts for the past 6 months. There are large transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. That's potential fraud, and certainly suggests premeditation. Can we use this? Possibly. If we can show she was planning to leave Trevor, that she was essentially stealing marital assets, that she was involved in an affair, and that the stress of discovering all this contributed to his fatal heart attack. It builds a narrative. Not necessarily criminal, but certainly civil. We might not win, but we can make her life very difficult. Do it," I said without hesitation. "File whatever needs to be filed. I want her to know she can't get away with this." "Mrs. Thatcher," Geraldine said carefully, "I need to warn you. This will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. Vivian will fight back. She has resources. She might try to discredit you, to paint you as a bitter mother-in-law. Are you sure you want to go down this path?" I thought about Trevor's letter, his plea to protect his memory, his apology for letting Vivian control our relationship, his love, constant despite the distance. "I'm sure," I said firmly. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Trevor, about all the moments Vivian had stolen from us, the holidays we didn't spend together, the phone calls that were cut short or never happened, the visits that were canceled at the last minute, the 8 years of distance that could never be recovered. But I also thought about the life insurance policy, about Trevor keeping me as his beneficiary, about the letter he'd written, preparing for the possibility of his death. He'd known something was wrong. He'd been trying to protect me, even from beyond the grave. Around 3 a.m, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Thatcher," a woman's voice asked. "You don't know me. My name is Lauren Rutherford. I was Trevor's coworker." "Hi, Lauren. It's very late. Is everything okay? I'm sorry for calling at this hour. I work the night shift now, and I just heard that you're in Boston, that you're looking into what happened to Trevor. I have information you need to hear." My heart started racing. "What kind of information? Can we meet tomorrow? In person? There are things I can't say over the phone. We arranged to meet at a diner near my hotel at 10 a.m. I hung up and sat in the dark hotel room. wondering what Lauren Rutherford could possibly tell me that would be worse than what I already knew. As it turned out, the answer was plenty. Enter. Chapter 4. The Witness. Lauren Rutherford was a woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair and tired eyes. She arrived at the diner 15 minutes early and was already sitting in a back booth when I got there. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she replied. She looked nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around a coffee mug. "I need to tell you something about the night Trevor died, something the official report doesn't mention." I leaned forward, my full attention on her. "I was working late that night, too," Lauren began. "Different floor, but same building. Around 6:30, I went down to the 3rd floor to use the better coffee machine. That's where Trevor and Marcus's department was. As I was walking past Trevor's office, I heard raised voices. Someone was arguing with him. "Who?" Lauren took a deep breath. "Vivian. She was there, in his office, and they were fighting." I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I stopped in the hallway because the argument sounded intense. What were they saying? Vivian was saying something about how Trevor was ruining everything, how he was being selfish and vindictive. Trevor was trying to keep his voice down, but I heard him say he wasn't going to let her steal everything he'd worked for. She said, and I remember this exactly, she said, "You'll give me what I want, or you'll regret it. I promise you that." My blood ran cold. This was the night Trevor died, hours before his heart attack. How long did the argument last? Maybe 10 minutes. Then I heard Vivian leave, her heels clicking on the floor. She was storming out. I peeked around the corner and saw her face. Mrs. Thatcher. She looked furious. Not sad, not upset, angry. And Trevor? I didn't see Trevor. I went back to my floor. But about an hour later, I heard the commotion, the ambulance, people running. That's when I found out Trevor had collapsed. Did you tell anyone about this? The police? The medical examiner? Lauren looked ashamed. No, I was afraid. She's connected. Her family has money, influence. I'm a single mother with 2 kids. I can't afford to lose my job or get dragged into something that could ruin my life. I know that sounds cowardly, but it doesn't. I interrupted. You have to protect yourself and your children, but are you willing to tell what you know now? If you have a lawyer, if there's some kind of official proceeding? Yes, I'll give a statement. What Vivian did was wrong, and Trevor deserves justice. But I need protection, legally. I'll make sure you have it. I promised. My attorney will contact you. After Lauren left, I sat in that diner for another hour, processing what I'd learned. Vivian hadn't just emotionally abused Trevor. She'd confronted him hours before his death, threatened him, pushed him to the breaking point while he was already under massive stress. Could you prosecute someone for causing a heart attack through emotional trauma? I didn't know, but it certainly painted a picture of who Vivian really was. I called Geraldine immediately. We have a witness, someone who heard Vivian threaten Trevor hours before he died. Geraldine was quiet for a moment. That changes things. That shows consciousness of guilt, shows she was actively engaged in the conflict that may have triggered his cardiac event. We need her statement in writing, and we need to file before the statute of limitations becomes an issue. What are we filing? Wrongful death suit. We're arguing that Vivian's actions, the affair, the financial manipulation, the threats, the emotional abuse, created the conditions that led to Trevor's fatal heart attack. It won't be easy to prove, but between Marcus's testimony about Trevor's state of mind, Lauren's witness statement about the confrontation, and Trevor's own documentation of the abuse, we have a case. Do it. File whatever you need to file. Mrs. Thatcher, once I file this, there's no going back. Vivian will know what you're doing. She will retaliate. Let her, I said. I'm not afraid of her, but I was lying. I was afraid, not of Vivian herself, but of what this battle would cost me. Financially, emotionally, physically. I was 71 years old. This fight could consume whatever time I had left. But Trevor had asked me to protect his memory, and I wasn't going to fail him again. That afternoon, I received an email from the life insurance company. They'd processed my claim, and the funds would be transferred to my account within 5 business days. $500,000. More money than I'd ever had in my life. I immediately contacted Geraldine. I want to set up a trust, I told her, in Trevor's name, for his memory. I want to use this money to help other people trapped in abusive marriages, to fund legal aid for people trying to escape situations like Trevor's. That's a beautiful legacy, Geraldine said. I'll draw up the paperwork. That night, I went back to Trevor's grave. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the cemetery. I told him about Lauren, about the lawsuit, about the trust I was creating in his name. I'm going to make sure your story helps other people, I promised. I'm going to make sure you didn't die for nothing. As I stood there, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see a man approaching, the same man I'd photographed leaving Vivian's house. He stopped when he saw me, surprise registering on his face. You must be Trevor's mother, he said. I'm Dylan Mercer. I'm Vivian's friend. Friend, I repeated coldly. Is that what we're calling it? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Look, I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. Really? Because I think you're the man my daughter-in-law was having an affair with. I think you're the reason my son's marriage fell apart. I think you're part of the reason my son is dead. Dylan's face paled. Trevor's death wasn't. I never wanted that. What did you want? For him to conveniently disappear so you could move into his house, his life, without complications. That's not fair. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. Dylan glanced around, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. Vivian told me Trevor was abusive. She said he controlled her money, isolated her from friends, that she was planning to leave him, but was afraid. She painted herself as a victim. I believed her. And now I'm not so sure. After Trevor died, Vivian changed. She became cold, calculating. She moved me into the house within a week. She's already talking about selling it, moving somewhere sunny, starting fresh. It's like Trevor never existed, like his death was just convenient for her plans. Do you have proof? Evidence that she lied about the abuse? Dylan hesitated. I have emails. Text messages where she talks about her plans, about how once Trevor was out of the picture, we could be together. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I thought she meant divorced. But now you're realizing she might have meant something else entirely. I finished. I'm not saying she killed him, Dylan said quickly. I'm not saying that. But I am saying she wasn't the victim she claimed to be. And I think I might have been played. Are you willing to give a statement? To provide those emails and texts? If I do, Vivian will destroy me. She has connections, money, lawyers. I'm just a personal trainer. I can't fight her. Then you're a coward, I said flatly. My son is dead. You were sleeping with his wife, helping her plan her escape from a marriage she systematically destroyed. And now you're afraid to tell the truth because it might be inconvenient for you. Dylan's jaw tightened. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'll give you whatever you need. I'll contact your lawyer, but I want witness protection or immunity or whatever keeps Vivian from coming after me. I'll see what we can arrange, I said. After Dylan left, I stood at Trevor's grave for a long time. The pieces were falling into place. Vivian's systematic manipulation of Trevor, her affair with Dylan, her threats the night of Trevor's death, her rush to move on afterward. It still wasn't murder in a legal sense, but it was something. A pattern of abuse, manipulation, and callous disregard for human life that had contributed to my son's death. And I was going to make sure the world knew about it. That night, I got a call that changed everything. It was Geraldine, Mrs. Thatcher. I have news. I filed the wrongful death lawsuit this afternoon. Vivian has been served. And as I predicted, she's already responded. How? She's countersuing. She's claiming you're engaged in harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's demanding we drop the suit and pay her $2 million in damages. I felt my world tilt. $2 million. I don't have that kind of money. She knows that. She's trying to scare you off, to make this too expensive and frightening to pursue. Classic intimidation tactic. What do? We fight. But Mrs. Thatcher, I need to be honest with you. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. Vivian is going to drag your name through the mud. She's going to paint you as an unhinged, grieving mother who can't accept that her son's marriage was his choice. She's going to try to destroy your credibility, Let her try, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I have the truth on my side. But as I hung up the phone, I wondered if the truth would be enough. And I wondered what price I'd ultimately pay for seeking justice for my son. Chapter 5. The Counterattack. Vivian's countersuit hit me like a freight train. Within 24 hours, my name was in the Boston Globe under a headline that made me sick. Grieving Mother's Harassment Campaign Against Widow. The article painted me as an unstable woman who couldn't accept that her son had chosen his wife over his mother. It quoted anonymous sources, undoubtedly Vivian's friends, describing me as obsessive, vindictive, and unable to let go. It mentioned my cancer diagnosis from 15 years ago, spinning it as evidence of mental instability rather than physical illness I'd overcome. Millicent called immediately. "Don't read the comments section," she warned. "People can be cruel when they don't know the full story." Too late. I'd already scrolled through hundreds of comments calling me everything from psycho mother-in-law to attention-seeking liar. My phone number had somehow leaked, and I was receiving threatening calls and messages. I had to change hotels twice in 3 days to escape reporters who'd tracked me down wanting statements. Geraldine arranged an emergency meeting. "We need to get ahead of this narrative," she said firmly. "Vivian is controlling the story. We need to present our evidence publicly. Can we do that? Won't it compromise the case? We'll be strategic. We'll release enough to show there's substance to our claims, but hold back the most damaging evidence for court. I suggest we hold a press conference. You tell your story. We present Marcus and Lauren as witnesses. We show the documentation Trevor left behind." I felt sick at the thought. I'm 71 years old. I'm not equipped for this kind of public battle. Geraldine's expression softened. "Mrs. Thatcher, Temperance, you're stronger than you realize. You've survived divorce, cancer, the loss of your only child, and you're still fighting for justice. That's not weakness. That's incredible strength." Her words gave me courage. "Okay, let's do it." The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday at Geraldine's law office. We spent the weekend preparing my statement, coaching me on how to handle hostile questions, organizing our evidence into a compelling narrative. Marcus and Lauren both agreed to appear, though both were visibly nervous about going public. Dylan also agreed to participate, though he insisted on appearing via video link with his face obscured and his voice disguised. The night before the press conference, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Trevor, about what he would want, about whether I was honoring his memory or simply making things worse. Around 2 a.m, my hotel phone rang. I answered without thinking. "You're making a terrible mistake," Vivian's voice said, cold and calm. "Withdraw your lawsuit, stop talking to the press, and I'll drop the countersuit. You can go back to Portland and live whatever's left of your pathetic life in peace." My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm not withdrawing anything. Then I'll destroy you. I have resources you can't imagine. Lawyers who will tear apart every aspect of your life. By the time I'm done, you'll be bankrupt, broken, and everyone will know you as the crazy woman who harassed a grieving widow." "Why do you care?" I asked. "You have Trevor's house, his savings, everything. Why does it matter if I tell the truth about what you did?" There was a long pause. "Because I don't want my life complicated by a bitter old woman's vendetta. Because I'm starting fresh, and I don't need you dragging me down with lies and accusations. They're not lies, and you know it. Trevor documented everything. Your affair, your financial manipulation, your threats. It's all there, in his own words." "Trevor was unstable," Vivian shot back. "Paranoid. His therapist will testify to that. I was trying to help him, and he turned on me. That's the story a jury will hear." "Trevor didn't have a therapist," I said slowly. "So either you're lying, or you made him see someone as part of your manipulation." Vivian laughed, a cold sound. "See you in court, Temperance. I hope you've made peace with losing everything." She hung up. I sat in the dark hotel room, shaking with anger and fear, but beneath those emotions was something harder: determination. The press conference was held in a conference room packed with reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers. I sat at a table with Geraldine beside me, Marcus and Lauren seated nearby, and Dylan's face obscured on a video screen. Geraldine opened with a statement outlining our case. Then it was my turn. I looked directly at the cameras and began to speak. "My name is Temperance Thatcher. I'm 71 years old. 2 weeks ago, my only child, Trevor Maxwell Thatcher, died of a heart attack at the age of 43. I wasn't at his funeral. I wasn't told until after it was over. I was denied the chance to say goodbye to the son I raised alone, the son I loved more than anything in the world. My voice broke, but I continued. I'm here today because I've discovered why I was excluded. My daughter-in-law, Vivian Thatcher, systematically isolated my son from his family, manipulated their finances, engaged in an extramarital affair, and threatened him hours before his fatal heart attack. The stress she created, the abuse she inflicted, contributed to the cardiac event that killed him. I held up Trevor's letter. This is a letter my son wrote to me, anticipating the possibility of his death. In it, he apologizes for the distance between us, distance created by Vivian's manipulation. He describes the abuse, the threats, the affair. He asked me to protect his memory and to not let Vivian rewrite our story. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I'm not here for money. The life insurance Trevor left me is going into a trust to help other people trapped in abusive marriages. I'm here for justice, for truth, for my son, who deserves better than to be erased by the woman who contributed to his death. The room erupted with questions. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras flashed, and for a moment I felt overwhelmed. But Geraldine guided me through it, selecting questions carefully. Marcus spoke next, describing Trevor's deteriorating mental state in his final months, his confession about Vivian's affair, his fear of financial ruin. Lauren described the argument she'd overheard hours before Trevor's death, Vivian's threats, the anger in her voice. Dylan, his face pixelated, his voice distorted, admitted to the affair, but insisted Vivian had lied to him, painting Trevor as abusive when the reverse was true. The conference lasted 90 minutes. By the time it ended, I was exhausted but felt strangely lighter. The truth was out there now. Whatever happened next, at least people knew Trevor's side of the story. That evening, the story exploded across media. Social media erupted with debates. Some people called me brave, others called me delusional, but the tide was shifting. People were questioning Vivian's narrative. People were asking why she'd excluded Trevor's mother from the funeral. People were demanding answers. 2 days later, the Boston Police Department announced they were opening an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Trevor's death. Not a murder investigation. They were clear about that. But an investigation into potential financial crimes and whether any illegal actions had contributed to his cardiac event. Vivian was forced to hire a criminal defense attorney in addition to her civil lawyers. The media attention intensified. Her social media accounts, once full of sympathy posts about her beloved husband, were now flooded with accusations and questions. And then, 7 days after the press conference, something extraordinary happened. It was late evening. I was in my hotel room, exhausted from another day of depositions and legal meetings, when my phone rang. This time, it was Vivian calling from her own number. I answered, curious. Hello, Vivian. What are you doing? She screamed, her composure completely shattered. What are you doing to my life? The police are investigating me. My friends won't talk to me. Someone threw a brick through my window. This is your fault. You've destroyed me. I felt a cold satisfaction. I didn't destroy you, Vivian. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure people knew about it. You're ruining everything. I did nothing wrong. Trevor was weak. He couldn't handle stress. And he died. That's not my fault. You isolated him from his family, I said, my voice hard. You had an affair. You manipulated your finances to steal from him. You threatened him hours before he died. Those are facts, Vivian. Those are things you did. I want you to stop, she shrieked. Drop the lawsuit. Tell the police it was all a misunderstanding. Leave me alone. No, my lawyers will destroy you. You'll have nothing left. I already have nothing left, I replied quietly. My son is dead. Everything else is just details. I hung up on her, cutting off her scream of frustration. That call, that moment of Vivian's mask slipping completely, was recorded. I'd been recording all my calls since the harassment began, on Geraldine's advice. We provided the recording to the police. In it, Vivian essentially admitted to the affair, to the financial manipulation, to the threats. She didn't explicitly confess to causing Trevor's death, But her lack of remorse, her focus on her own problems rather than Trevor's death, painted a damning picture. Public opinion turned decisively against her. But as I sat in my hotel room that night, listening to the rain against the window, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, sad, empty. Because no matter what happened to Vivian, no matter what justice we achieved, Trevor was still gone. My son was still in the ground, and nothing I did could bring him back. That was the price of this fight. Not money or reputation, but the constant reminder that the person I was fighting for would never know if I won. Bauer, Chapter 6. The Investigation. The police investigation into Vivian's financial activities moved quickly once they had Trevor's documentation and the recording of her breakdown. Detective Rita Sandoval, a woman in her early 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, contacted me directly. "Mrs. Thatcher, I want you to understand what we're looking at here," she said during our first meeting. "Your son documented what appears to be systematic financial fraud. Vivian transferred significant marital assets into offshore accounts, created shell companies, and essentially drained resources that should have been jointly owned. That's potentially criminal. But did she kill him?" I asked bluntly. Detective Sandoval chose her words carefully. "Legally, we can't prove murder. Your son had a massive heart attack. The medical examiner found significant arterial blockage. He had underlying heart disease he apparently didn't know about. Without that pre-existing condition, the stress alone wouldn't have killed him. So she gets away with it." I didn't say that. We can prove fraud. We can prove emotional abuse. We can build a case that demonstrates her actions created the conditions for his death, even if we can't prove direct causation. It won't be a murder charge, but it won't be nothing, either. Over the following weeks, I watched as the investigation unfolded. The police obtained warrants for Vivian's financial records, her email accounts, her phone. They interviewed her friends, her colleagues, her family. Her affair partner, Dylan, provided everything he had. Emails where Vivian discussed her plans to leave Trevor once she'd secured all the assets. Texts where she called Trevor weak and pathetic. Messages where she fantasized about her future life without him. Her own words condemned her. Meanwhile, the civil case proceeded. Geraldine filed motions, took depositions, built our wrongful death claim methodically. Vivian's attorneys fought back hard, but they were hampered by their client's own actions. The evidence was too strong, too well documented, but the toll on me was enormous. I'd been in Boston for 6 weeks. My savings were depleting despite the life insurance money, which I'd already committed to the trust for Trevor. I was living in hotels, eating restaurant food, aging years in a matter of weeks. Millicent flew out to visit me. "Tempe, you look terrible," she said bluntly when she arrived. "You need to take care of yourself." "I can't stop now," I protested. "Not when we're so close." "Close to what? Vivian in prison? That won't bring Trevor back. You winning a lawsuit? That won't let you hug your son again." She sat down heavily. "I loved Trevor too. He was like a nephew to me, but he wouldn't want you to destroy yourself seeking revenge." "It's not revenge," I insisted. "It's justice. Sometimes those are the same thing." Her words haunted me. Was I seeking justice? Or was I simply trying to make Vivian hurt as much as I hurt? Was I honoring Trevor's memory, or using his death as an excuse to wage war? That weekend, something happened that forced me to confront these questions. I received a message from someone named Kathleen Thatcher, Trevor's paternal grandmother, my ex-husband's mother. We hadn't spoken in over 30 years, not since the divorce. "Temperance," the email read. "I've been following the news about Trevor's death and your lawsuit. I want you to know that I believe you. Harold, my ex-husband and Trevor's father, does too. We'd like to meet with you if you're willing. We're in Boston visiting family. Please consider it. Kathleen." My ex-husband, the man who'd walked out on Trevor and me when Trevor was 5 years old, who'd remarried, had other children, and essentially erased us from his life, who Trevor had mentioned maybe twice in the past 20 years. I almost deleted the email, but something made me respond. I agreed to meet them at a quiet cafe the next day. Harold looked old. He was 73, and the years had not been kind. Graying, overweight, tired-looking. Kathleen, his mother, was in her mid-90s, frail but alert. "Temperance," Harold said when I sat down. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us." "I'm only here because Kathleen asked," I replied coldly. You have no right to insert yourself into this situation. I know, he said quietly. I know I was a terrible father. I abandoned Trevor. I abandoned you. I have no excuse that makes it okay. Then why are you here? Kathleen answered, her voice surprisingly strong for someone her age. Because we love Trevor too. Harold's an old fool who made terrible choices. But Trevor was still his son. Still my grandson. And what that woman did to him is unconscionable. Harold nodded. I've been following the investigation. I read Trevor's letter that your lawyer released. The part where he talked about losing his sister Sophia when he was young, about his fear of abandonment. That broke me, Temperance, because I caused that fear. I abandoned him, and it shaped his whole life. It made him vulnerable to someone like Vivian. Tears were streaming down his face. I can't undo what I did. I can't go back and be the father Trevor needed, but I can help you now. I have resources. I can help fund the legal battle. I can testify about Trevor's character, about how Vivian's claims that he was abusive or unstable are lies. I don't want your money, I said harshly, or your testimony. Please, Kathleen interjected. Let us help. Let us do this one thing for the grandson we failed. It won't fix what we did, but maybe it will help you get justice for Trevor. I sat there, torn. Part of me wanted to reject them, to punish them for the decades of absence, but another part, the part that was simply exhausted from carrying this fight alone, wanted to accept. Fine, I said finally. You can help fund the legal case, but don't expect me to forgive you. Don't expect some tearful reconciliation. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Understood, Harold said. They wrote a check for $50,000 to cover my legal expenses. They hired their own attorney to file supporting briefs in the wrongful death case, and Harold agreed to give a deposition about Trevor's character, refuting Vivian's claims that Trevor had been paranoid or unstable. It was strange, having them involved. The people who'd abandoned Trevor in childhood now fighting for justice in his death. There was an irony there that wasn't lost on me. 3 days later, the police arrested Vivian. It wasn't for murder. It was for wire fraud, theft, and financial elder abuse. Apparently, one of the accounts she'd drained had belonged to Trevor's deceased grandfather, a trust Trevor had been managing. Bail was set at $200,000. She posted it immediately, using money from one of her offshore accounts. But the damage was done. Vivian's carefully constructed image as the grieving widow had completely crumbled. The media now portrayed her as a calculating sociopath who'd destroyed her husband and stolen from his family. Her employer, she worked as a consultant for a marketing firm, put her on administrative leave. Her friends publicly distanced themselves. Even her own family released a statement saying they were shocked and disappointed by the allegations. She was being destroyed, just as she'd destroyed Trevor, and I should have felt satisfied. But instead, I just felt tired. That night, I returned to Trevor's grave. It was early December now, almost a month since his death. The cemetery was decorated for the holidays, which felt obscene. Cheerful lights on graves, wreaths on mausoleums. I'm fighting for you, I told Trevor's headstone, just like you asked me to, but I don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore. Vivian is facing consequences, but it doesn't bring you back. It doesn't fix anything. The wind whispered through the bare trees, and I imagined it was Trevor responding. But of course, there was nothing. Just cold and silence, and the unbridgeable distance between the living and the dead. Millicent found me there an hour later, guided by the GPS on my phone. She sat beside me without speaking, just her presence a comfort. Finally, she said, "You've done what Trevor asked. You protected his memory. You exposed the truth. Maybe it's time to let the legal system take over. Time to go home, Tempe. Time to grieve your son instead of fighting for him." "I can't stop now," I whispered. "If I stop, what was it all for?" "It was for the truth, and you've achieved that. Vivian will face legal consequences whether you stay in Boston or go home. Your presence isn't required for justice to proceed." She was right. I knew she was right. But some part of me felt that if I left Boston, if I went back to Portland, I'd be abandoning Trevor all over again. Still, I was so tired. Bone tired. Soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. "Think about it," Millicent said gently. "Just think about it." That night, back at the hotel, I received an email from the cemetery where Trevor was buried. It was regarding the permanent headstone I'd ordered. They'd completed it and wanted to schedule installation. The design I'd chosen included not just Trevor's name and dates, but a quote I'd selected carefully. Beloved son, forever remembered, forever missed. Not husband. Not anything Vivian had chosen. Just son. It was a small victory, but it mattered. The headstone installation was scheduled for the following week. After that, I decided I would consider Millicent's advice about going home, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Chapter 7. The Trial. Despite my exhaustion, I couldn't leave Boston. Not yet. The criminal trial was set to begin in January, fast-track due to the high-profile nature of the case and Vivian's failed attempt to flee to the Cayman Islands. She'd been stopped at the airport and had her passport confiscated. The civil case, my wrongful death lawsuit, was scheduled to proceed after the criminal trial. Geraldine explained the strategy. If Vivian was convicted of financial crimes in the criminal case, it would strengthen our civil case significantly. December passed in a blur of preparation. I spent Christmas alone in my hotel room, staring at a small plastic tree provided by the management, thinking about all the Christmases with Trevor. His first Christmas, when he was 6 months old and tried to eat the wrapping paper. The Christmas he was 10 and built an elaborate Lego city. The last Christmas we'd spent together, 7 years ago, before Vivian had convinced him that flying to Portland was too stressful. Millicent called, trying to persuade me to come home for the holidays. Tempe, you're going to make yourself sick. Come home, rest, and come back for the trial. I can't, I said simply. If I leave now, I won't have the strength to come back. The trial began on January 9th. The courtroom was packed. Media, curious onlookers, people from both Trevor's and Vivian's lives. I sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution table, where I could see everything. Vivian arrived dressed conservatively, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. Her attorneys had clearly coached her to look sympathetic, but when her eyes met mine across the courtroom, I saw the hatred there, cold and pure. The prosecution's case was methodical. They presented Trevor's documentation, the offshore accounts, the shell companies. They showed emails where Vivian discussed hiding assets from Trevor. They presented bank records showing systematic theft. Marcus testified about Trevor's state of mind. Lauren testified about the argument hours before Trevor's death. Dylan testified about the affair, and Vivian's statements that she was waiting for Trevor to be out of the picture. Vivian's defense was that she'd been protecting herself from an abusive husband. Her attorneys presented a therapist who testified that Vivian had sought counseling for intimate partner violence. They showed photos of a bruise on Vivian's arm that she claimed Trevor had caused, but the prosecution demolished this defense. The bruise photo was dated 6 months after Trevor's death. The therapist had only seen Vivian once, 3 weeks after Trevor died, and had based her assessment entirely on Vivian's self-reported history. There was no medical evidence, no police reports, no witnesses to any abuse. In contrast, Marcus, Trevor's colleagues, even his doctors testified that Trevor had never exhibited violent behavior, had never mentioned marital problems beyond normal stress. I watched Vivian on the stand. She cried at appropriate moments. She spoke in a soft, wounded voice. She painted herself as a victim. But then the prosecution played the recording of her phone call to me, the one where she'd screamed about what I was doing to her life, the one where she'd admitted to the affair, to the financial maneuvering, where she'd shown no remorse about Trevor's death. The jury's expressions shifted. Some looked disgusted. Others looked angry. They were seeing through her act. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. Guilty on 14 counts of wire fraud, theft, and financial crimes. Not murder. She'd never be convicted of murder, but she was going to prison. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. The prosecution was asking for 20 years. Vivian's attorneys were arguing for probation and community service. I left the courthouse feeling hollow. There had been no dramatic moment of satisfaction, no sense of victory, just exhaustion and sadness. That evening, Geraldine called. The civil case settles or goes to trial in 4 months. Vivian's conviction strengthens our position enormously. Her attorneys have already reached out about a possible settlement. I don't want her money, I said. It's not about money, Geraldine reminded me gently. It's about public acknowledgement. It's about the court formally recognizing that Vivian's actions contributed to Trevor's death. That matters for his legacy. She was right. The criminal case had addressed Vivian's financial crimes, but it hadn't addressed the wrongful death, the contribution to Trevor's cardiac event, the systematic abuse. What kind of settlement are they offering? I asked. Public apology. Admission that her actions caused Trevor emotional distress. Agreement to not contest your narrative of events. And a payment to the Trevor Thatcher Foundation for abuse victims, the trust you established. They're offering $2 million. I thought about it. $2 million to help other people trapped in abusive relationships. A public admission from Vivian. Official recognition of Trevor's suffering. I'll consider it, I said. That night, I went to Trevor's grave. The permanent headstone had been installed while I was consumed with the trial. It was beautiful. Simple gray granite with the inscription I'd chosen. I've been fighting for you for 2 months, I told him. I've destroyed my health, depleted my savings, and aged a decade. And I still don't know if it's enough. If any of it is enough. The wind rustled through the cemetery, carrying the scent of snow. January in Boston was bitterly cold, but I barely felt it anymore. Vivian is going to prison. She'll be punished for what she did. But you're still gone, Trevor. You're still in the ground, and I'm still up here, and nothing I do changes that fundamental fact. I pressed my palm against the cold granite. I miss you so much. I miss our Sunday phone calls. I miss your terrible jokes that you got from me. I miss feeling like someone in the world needed me. I sat there for a long time, and slowly, I came to a realization. I'd been fighting for Trevor, but Trevor was beyond help. The living person I needed to fight for was myself. I needed to find a way to live with this grief, to build a life that honored Trevor's memory without being consumed by the fight for his justice. The next morning, I called Geraldine. Accept the settlement, I told her. With one condition. Vivian allocates an additional $1 million to the foundation, making it $3 million total. And she writes a personal letter acknowledging everything she did, to be published publicly. Geraldine was quiet for a moment. That's a strong ask. They might refuse. Then we go to trial. I'm not backing down on this. 2 days later, Vivian's attorneys agreed. The settlement was finalized 3 weeks after her sentencing. She received 18 years in prison, far more than her attorneys had hoped for, but less than the prosecution wanted. She'd be in her mid-50s when released. The letter she was required to write was published in the Boston Globe. It was brief, legally crafted by her attorneys, but it said what needed to be said, i.e., Vivian Thatcher. Acknowledged that during my marriage to Trevor Thatcher, I engaged in financial manipulation, had an extramarital affair, and subjected Trevor to emotional abuse and distress. My actions contributed to the stress that exacerbated his underlying health condition, leading to the cardiac event that caused his death. I deeply regret my actions and the pain I have caused the Thatcher family. I have agreed to fund the Trevor Thatcher Foundation for abuse victims as a small step toward making amends for my actions. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was public. It was official. It was acknowledgement. 3 days after the settlement was finalized, I packed my bags and prepared to return to Portland. I visited Trevor's grave one final time. The snow had started to fall, soft and gentle, covering the cemetery in white. I did what you asked, I told him. I protected your memory. I didn't let Vivian erase our story. The foundation will help other people trapped like you were. Your death will mean something. I placed a single yellow rose on the grave. I'm going home now. Back to Portland. Back to my life. I don't know what that life looks like anymore without you in it, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to learn how to live with this grief instead of fighting against it. As I walked away from the cemetery for the last time, I didn't look back. Looking back meant giving in to the temptation to stay, to remain locked in this battle, to never move forward. At the airport, waiting for my flight, I received an unexpected email. It was from someone named Gregory Thatcher, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in decades. Temperance. It read, I've been following everything in the news. I want you to know that the family is proud of you, not just for fighting for Trevor, but for exposing what happened to him. You've probably saved other people from similar fates. That takes real courage. When you're ready, we'd like to reconnect. The Thatcher family has been fractured for too long. Maybe Trevor's memory can help bring us back together. Greg. I read the email 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Maybe something good could come from this tragedy. Maybe Trevor's death could mend old wounds, reconnect broken family ties, give purpose to senseless loss. The flight home felt different from the flight to Boston 2 months earlier. Then, I'd been consumed by rage and grief and determination. Now I was just tired, but it was a clean tired. The exhaustion that comes after completing a marathon, not the poisonous fatigue of unfinished business. Millicent picked me up at Portland Airport. She took one look at me and pulled me into a tight hug. "Welcome home, Tempe. I'm not sure where home is anymore," I admitted. "Home is where you figure out how to keep living. And you will. You're the strongest person I know." Over the following weeks, I slowly rebuilt my life. I reconnected with old friends. I resumed activities I'd abandoned. I started seeing a grief counselor who specialized in parental loss. The foundation I'd established in Trevor's name grew quickly. The $3 million from the settlement was just the beginning. Other donors contributed. Survivors of domestic abuse reached out, sharing their stories, expressing gratitude that someone was helping people trapped as Trevor had been trapped. 6 months after returning to Portland, I received a letter from Vivian. It had been forwarded through Geraldine, as I'd blocked all direct contact. I debated whether to open it. Finally, curiosity won. "Mrs. Thatcher," it read in Vivian's neat handwriting. "I know this letter won't change anything, but I'm writing it anyway because my therapist here says I need to take responsibility for my actions. You were right about me. About everything. I did manipulate Trevor. I did isolate him from you. I did have an affair and steal from him. I did threaten him the night before he died. I didn't set out to hurt him. I convinced myself I was the victim, that he was the problem, that I deserved better. I rewrote the story in my head until I believed my own lies. But the truth is, Trevor was a good man. He loved you deeply. He talked about you often, especially in those last months. He regretted the distance between you more than anything. I took that from him. I took his relationship with his mother. I took his peace of mind. I took his life. Even if the law doesn't call it murder, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that Trevor's last thoughts, in that moment when he collapsed, weren't of me. They were of you. He was reaching for his phone, trying to call you. Marcus told me that later, and I never told you because I didn't want you to know. He was trying to reach you, Mrs. Thatcher. In his final moments, he was trying to call his mother. I'm sorry. For everything. Vivian. The letter destroyed me. I sat on my couch and sobbed for hours, mourning not just Trevor's death, but the reunion we never got to have, the phone call he never got to make, the reconciliation stolen by a heart that stopped beating before his fingers could dial my number. But eventually, the tears stopped, and in their place was something unexpected. Peace. Not happiness. Not resolution. But peace. The acceptance that some things can't be fixed, can't be undone, can only be lived with. Trevor had been trying to reach me. That meant something. It meant our bond, despite the distance, despite Vivian's interference, had remained strong. It meant I mattered to him until the very end. I wrote one last letter to Trevor, sealed it, and buried it at the base of a tree I planted in my backyard, a yellow rose bush, his favorite flower. In the letter, I told him everything I'd wanted to say. I told him I loved him. I forgave him for the distance. I understood he'd been trapped. And I told him I was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not this year, but eventually. I was going to build a life that honored his memory without being consumed by his loss. 1 year after Trevor's death, the foundation held its first annual gala. We'd helped over 200 people escape abusive relationships, funded legal aid for dozens of divorce cases, and established support groups in 15 cities. Harold and Kathleen attended. My cousin Greg and his family came. Marcus came, and Lauren, and even Dylan, all of us connected by Trevor, all of us trying to make meaning from tragedy. As I gave my speech that night, talking about Trevor and his legacy, I realized something profound. I'd survived. I'd faced the worst thing that can happen to a parent, losing a child, and I'd survived. More than survived. I'd fought. I'd won in the ways that mattered, and I'd built something meaningful from the ruins. Was it worth it? Was the fight, the exhaustion, the destruction of my health worth achieving justice for Trevor? I still don't know the answer to that question. Some days I think yes, absolutely. Other days I think I should have just gone home, grieved privately, let the legal system handle things without destroying myself in the process. But I did what Trevor asked me to do. I protected his memory. I exposed the truth. And maybe, just maybe, I prevented other mothers from standing at their sons as graves, denied even the chance to say goodbye. That has to be enough, because it's all I have.